Welcome to Channel 4.
In 1982, the fourth television channel that Margaret Thatcher had promised as part of her first election campaign debuted. They had been approached by Peter Richardson, the proprietor of a comedy cabaret club in London, where a bunch of former Comedy Store regulars were forming the epicentre of the British alternative comedy movement. This movement, which had been coined by the press, was seen as the comedy version of punk, rebelling against the stale, racist and sexist stand-up circulating the working men's clubs of the time. Although something like a sketch show or some sort of variety show may have sounded like the most obvious way to transition to television, he instead pitched a series of short films. These would be written by and starring the club's three double acts: Richardson and Nigel Planer, Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders, and Rick Mayall and Adrian Edmondson. To those in the UK, most of these core members are household names. To those of you outside the UK, remember the fairy godmother in Shrek 2? That's Jennifer Saunders. Remember the two old ladies in Coraline? That's Jennifer Saunders and Dawn French. Remember Drop Dead Fred? That's Rick Mayall. He's the most popular one of the group in the UK. Also, their MC Alexei Sayle is in an Indiana Jones film. This series gave them the fantastic opportunity of creative license at the dawn of their careers. The first of these short films, the famous Five parody Five Go Mad in Dorset, was the first comedy programme to air on the new 4th channel, airing on their opening night on the 2nd of November 1982. Although plenty of people have heard of the series, it's still safe to say that it has more of a cult following than a mainstream one, with most people only knowing of a couple of the most famous ones. The only thing the episodes really have in common is that they can all be considered comedy, although as Rick Mayall said, they would be better titled interesting films, as there would be less of an expectation to have as many laughs as, say, a sitcom. There are lots of different styles of comedy, but many episodes either are in the style of a certain kind of film or a direct parody. However, you don't need to be familiar with what they are parodying to enjoy them. My comfort episode is Gregory, Diary of a Nutcase, which is the only one to very specifically parody a single film. And I haven't seen Silence of the Lambs. I don't know what that says about me. There's still plenty of styles of comedy in the show, from slapstick to parody to political satire. Again, don't feel put off by the political satire. You don't have to know anything about John Major to enjoy the weird circus fanfiction about him, Red Nose of Courage. Clown sex scenes, they're just inherently funny, aren't they? I don't need any historical context to understand this. The only topical ones that made me feel slightly lost were the ones about things that happened in my lifetime. The core 6 were joined by a few regulars, most notably Robbie Coltrane, who displayed a wonderful range of characters, and Keith Allen, who co-wrote and co-directed a few episodes with Richardson. They were also joined later on by their former compere, stand-up Alexei Sayle, who you may recognise as the Bolofsky family in The Young Ones. There was a lot of multi-rolling, particularly in series 1 to 3. The core 6 and company all have fantastic range, so whilst they may occasionally play the same archetype, it never feels like we're watching the same character twice. They're also wonderfully versatile. Peter Richardson appears in every episode, in everything from leading roles to minor ones. The episodes vary a lot, so whichever episodes you prefer will vary greatly from person to person. But personally, I always find something to enjoy, and the performances are always a big part of that. However, I think it's worth pointing out that the dystopian cyberpunk episode Slags is worth watching purely for the costume design alone. Just look at it. Look at that dandy hanky hanging from a punk stud bracelet. It's divine. They also have pretty good original soundtracks that fit the feel of each episode. Kate Bush contributed to the soundtrack of GLC, The Carnage Continues, including a song about Kane Livingston that purposefully sounds really mainstream and unlike her usual stuff, but it's still really catchy. She also appeared in the Series 4 episode Les Dogs as the Bride. Oh, speaking of music, I'm never listening to Tom Jones the same way again.
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone.
There are plenty of episodes that stumble a bit at the endings, but you shouldn't let that overshadow the rest of the episode that came before it. You should focus on the journey, not the destination. A lot of them get better with rewatches as well, as each one builds up its own atmosphere. Most of their shorts are standalone stories, but they did make some sequels. What I appreciate about them is the fact that they are aware that they can't do the same thing twice. They put the characters in a different situation, and, with arguably one exception, there's no cheap callbacks to what came before. They often change the focus, even making other characters the protagonists. There's also spiritual sequels like The Strike and GLC The Carnage Continues, both being about Hollywood adapting recent British political events into star-studded action blockbusters. I even think that Five Go to Rehab, which didn't get great reviews, isn't a big step down from their previous two famous Five parodies. I'd say it's more or less on par with the second. They can't just do an accurate parody of the famous Five twice. They have to do something different. First by changing the environment around them with Five Go Mad on mescaline, and then changing the characters as they grow through their midlife crises. I also think it would probably have been better received if it was part of a series rather than a standalone special. There's lots of expectations that come with the return of the comic strip, especially for the 30th anniversary. The first series was more focused on atmosphere and an ensemble of characters than plot. There was gradually more of a focus on plot in Series 2 and the subsequent specials, as well as their first two feature films, Supergrass and Eat the Rich. More than half of them were written by Richardson and his writing partner Pete Richards. And yes, he is a real person. It's not an unimaginative alias for Peter Richardson, it's just a weird coincidence. Richardson also started directing with Supergrass. Series 3 was more plot-focused and the most cinematic, with all but one of them receiving limited cinema screenings. Whilst the core members didn't appear as regularly as they had done in previous episodes, it felt like this series was more of a platform for individual creatives, from the Rickenade slapstick spectacular Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door to Lexi Sale's Brechtian manifesto Didn't You Kill My Brother? After Series 3, Richardson pitched a 3-part miniseries to Channel 4 called Pope Dave, a comedy about corruption in the Vatican. Channel 4 hastily dropped it after the press caught wind of the controversial subject matter, leading to public outcry. This prompted Richardson to take the comic strip to the BBC. They also refused to make it, but he did the next two series with them anyway. The material for Pope Dave ended up going to the Series 4 episode Spaghetti Hoops and Richardson's 1991 film The Pope Must Diet. It's sadly overshadowed by the controversy surrounding the name, as the T on the end was added to the title in the States when all of the major networks refused to promote it. Anyway, the two series the comic strip made with the BBC are lesser known due to fewer repeats, as well as their exclusion from Channel 4's streaming service and certain box sets. Series 4 continued to have more of a focus on plot than Series 1 and 2, and was completely directed by Peter Richardson and written by Richardson and Richards. Whilst the collaborative spirit was what had made the earlier series so special, I don't think that this shift is necessarily a bad thing. The core members of the troupe no longer needed a creative outlet as they had their own projects. Most notably, Rick Mayall could only appear in one episode of the series and couldn't appear in Series 5 at all due to the scheduling conflict with the ITV political sitcom The New Statesman. The leads usually went to core members, while supporting roles were made up by new familiar faces like Miranda Richardson, Stephen O'Donnell, and the cast of Richardson's next series, Glam Metal Detectives. I plan on reviewing both that and his next show, Stella Street, so if you want to watch that, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you're the first to see it. There's always a sense of community when watching the show, and that doesn't go away. Stephen Mangan properly feels like part of the gang now, and he's only been in the past 3 episodes, but I'm getting ahead of myself. After a few specials, Series 5 saw more collaborations, with 2 episodes co-directed with Keith Allen, 1 written and directed by Robbie Coltrane, and 1 written and directed by Paul Bartel, an American director who had previously appeared in The Pope Must Die and the comic strip presents Christmas special, Wild Turkey. All of the specials since then, however, were for Channel 4 and later Gold, all of which were directed by Richardson and written by him and Richards. He also directed a film in 2004 called Churchill: The Hollywood Years, yet again parodying how Hollywood adapts history. The most recent special was 8 years ago with 2016's Red Top, which parodied the tabloid phone tapping scandal with a 70s-style Watergate setting. So, will the comic strip presents return? Well, Peter Richardson certainly wants to. During the Picture House Cinema Tour earlier this year, he said as much, and that he had started one about Boris Johnson being a Russian spy or something, but that politics had changed so rapidly after he left office that he felt it was no longer relevant. I would love for it to return. I actually think it would be better if we got a full 6 series rather than the special, because again, then all of the weight of the return wouldn't be on a single idea. And the others could even contribute to writing or even directing again. After all, one of the best things about the show is its variety. However, if these 42 episodes and 4 movies are all we have, then that's quite a legacy, and I'm happy with that. I've been to several screening events of it this year, and I simply adore it. If you're watching this video on the day of its release, there's a free screening in London tomorrow. If not, there's another screening in London this November. I recommend this show to anyone who is a fan of the cast and, well, fans of British comedy? It's actually hard for me to be more specific because of how different the episodes are. If you want to check it out yourself, then series 1 to 3, 4 Men in a Car and 4 Men in a Plane, are all available to watch for free in the UK on the Channel 4 website. The full show, including episodes made for Channel 4, the BBC and Gold, are all available on ITVX Premium, formerly BritBox UK, alongside Richardson's 4 movies. I don't know where you can legitimately find it outside of the UK, but I imagine it might be on BritBox in countries that have it. So, where to start? Well, that could be a video itself. It depends on what you like, really. If you're a Rick and Aid fan, I recommend Mr. Johnny Lives Next Door. If you're a fan of spaghetti westerns, then I recommend A Fistful of Traveller's Checks. If you've ever been in a band and aren't into some of the more broad humour of some of the other episodes, then I recommend Bad News Tour and More Bad News. If you want to watch one that parodies Hollywood, then I highly recommend the Golden Rose of Montreux winning The Strike. Whilst I don't recommend starting with one of the feature films, especially as I think only Supergrass is officially labelled as a comic strip one, I honestly think that The Pope Must Die is the best thing that Peter Richardson has ever made. In my opinion, Series 3 is probably the strongest series, so that's not a bad place to start either. If you see an episode and don't like it, check out another one. Even for an anthology series, it's a very varied show, and some of them are an acquired taste. And of course, if you want to start from the very beginning, I'm reviewing Series 1 in a couple of weeks. So if you want to see that, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. If you want to watch me review the other television event of 1982 that brought the comic strips comedy to the masses, you can watch my review of The Young Ones right here. See you soon!